The Awakened Chronicles, Book 1, by Richard Spillman, read for you by Matthew Hicks. To the reader, this novel is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or used fictitiously. All characters are fictional, and any similarity to people living or dead is purely coincidental. In no way is the author claiming that Lazarus is still alive, nor is he trying to rewrite biblical history. His references to what Jesus told Lazarus are fictional and intended to create a what-if type question, correlating with the story premise as it is laid out. This is simply the author's take on what might have been. And as it is appointed for men to die once. Hebrews 9:27. Dedication. This book is dedicated to my wife Bonnie. Without her love, support, understanding, and wisdom, none of this would be possible. Chapter 1. AD 79, Susa, Parthian Empire. 12 days ago, I left Rome on a mission to purge a great evil from the world. I arrived at Susa, or as the Hebrews call it, Shushan, the capital of the Parthian Empire in the east. I had come to rid the earth of Nero, the accursed Roman emperor who had faked his death 15 years earlier. Since dusk, I had been standing outside the light brown sandstone domus of Attilus, Nero's new name, in rain so thick it could almost drown a man. I was waiting for the right moment to strike. I welcomed the rain. It would obscure my approach and cover any sound I might make in the villa. I found shelter beneath the towering statue of Mithra, the Parthian god called the protector of truth. As a close friend of Jesus, I found the winged figure grotesque. I dug my fingers into its rough stone, unaffected by the water soaking through my light tunic. No diviner, sorcerer, or false god will protect Nero. Tonight I am the hand of justice. Occasionally the sky flashed with light, followed by a crack of thunder. The lightning left a metallic taste in the air that seemed to give me strength for what I longed to do on this night. I watched the windows, waiting patiently for the last candle to be extinguished, the signal to slip into the villa under the cover of darkness. It wasn't long before a solitary candle flickered in one window, a shadow moved in front of it, and the light went out. The domus was now completely dark. I waited to give him time to settle down, then made my way along the wide, muddy street, coated with layers of soft brown clay, to an iron gate. He had no guards. He did not need them. No natural could harm him, and no guard could stop an awakened. The grinding sound of metal against stone echoed into the night as I opened the gate. The rain had let up some, but it still pounded against the red-tiled roof. Rainwater flowed across the roof and poured over the edge like a small waterfall, plunging down into the trough in the open atrium. The deep groan of a camel echoed in the distance. I crept up the stairs, following the thick scent of rosewater perfume, a favorite of Nero's, which mapped the way. Within seconds, I stood at his door. The small amulet hanging above the doorframe wasn't going to protect him from me. A faint line of light glowed underneath. He must have sensed me and lit a candle. I shivered, knowing that in my hands lay justice. I whispered a prayer, opened the door, and stepped in. Right into Nero, who was standing inches from the doorway. He shoved me back. "Who are you?" he demanded with an authority born of rage. Silently, I studied him for a moment, soaking in the thrill of what was to come. A cold, wet wind blew through the doorway, rippling his royal scarlet and gold robe. His eyes were deep, dark wells of venom. I listened to the pounding rain. I smelled death in the room. I felt the presence of evil. This is the beast. I was cloaked in the shadow cast by a small candle flickering behind him. If he could have seen my eyes, he would have known what I was and why I was there. He lunged forward and plunged a dagger into my gut with a confident smirk. It stung. He pulled the blade out and thrust it in again and again. I stood there, enduring the pain. His smirk morphed into hesitant terror. He must have noticed no blood flowed, that my wounds healed as quickly as they were made, because he stopped, stepped backward and to the side, exposing my face in the dance of the candlelight. Lightning flash, followed by a resounding clap of thunder. He froze. His lips trembled. His eyes widened. He knew what I was. He let out a guttural wail. "Who are you?" "I am Lazarus!" I stepped forward, grabbed his arm, and bit him. As soon as my saliva penetrated his skin, he dissolved into a pile of red-brown dust. Chapter 2. Ever the imitator of God, Satan has the ability to reanimate those who have recently died, if he gets to them before significant decay sets in. But these are mindless creatures, what we call level 2 UDs, unless their bodies can be possessed by his demons. These are the level 1 UDs, and they can, like us, live forever. Awakened Incident Manual, AIM Manual, page 4. Sunday, April 10th, present day, 9:47 p.m., Seattle. Sometimes in the deepest, darkest recesses of my heart, I wonder if mankind deserves to survive. Lazarus, or L as he preferred, the director of SOAR, sat at his desk, frozen, staring out into the Seattle night, as if by concentrating he could dissolve into it and find peace. Worry, not age, tugged at the muscles of his face. No, his scars were invisible and ran far deeper than his age or physical appearance. They were scars born of 20 centuries of leading a secret organization to help mankind while watching human beings, naturals, driven by lies, kill each other. Doubt and disappointment had become his ageless companions. I feel like I'm building a dam out of paper to stop a tsunami. Why are lies so powerful and truth so fragile? He went by L, in part because his real name, Lazarus, raised eyebrows and brought questions he'd rather not deal with. Besides, after his arrogance in Berlin in 1938 had led to the death of 15 innocent naturals, the name left a bad taste in his mouth. Yet, there was still evil out there to hunt. He slowly, rhythmically rubbed his hands. The last time I felt like this was... He closed his eyes and cupped his face, bowing his head. That dark day at the foot of the cross. That memory, as it always did, brought tears to his eyes. His words broke the silence of the evening. Lord, forgive me. You gave everything so that mankind could survive, but I'm so tired. When can I finally come home? I don't belong here anymore. Al leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. A darkness is coming. He wrinkled his forehead. It may already be here. Monday, April 11th, 11:03 a.m., Dubai. Though she'd moved to Dubai from India 6 years ago today, Bharat Akhtar walked into the Dubai Mall for the first and last time. The mall was enormous, filled with exotic shops and the clamor of people everywhere. She soaked in the wonder of the place through determined eyes. She wore what she hoped appeared to be thick clothing underneath her traditional black burqa. It was far too big for her petite frame. A strand of her long black hair peeked out from under the oversized hood, and she hurriedly pushed it inside again. Even though, as she'd become used to the temperature extremes of Dubai, as soon as she entered the mall, beads of sweat formed on her forehead. Yet her hands trembled as if she were shivering from the cold. She paused in front of the huge indoor aquarium. Brightly colored fish swam by, their scales glistening from the lights above. Jellyfish moved in slow, rhythmic pulses, their delicate bodies painted in brilliant reds and oranges. The scene served its purpose. It calmed her enough to force her hands to stop vibrating. Children pointed at the fish, giggling. Adults took pictures. Only 23. Not enough. Besides, this was supposed to happen at the other end of the mall, where the effect would be greatest. I'm doing the right thing. It's Allah's will. She hoped to send money home when she came to Dubai, but her hosts had confiscated her passport, set her up in a dilapidated housing, and paid her next to nothing. Though she worked 12-hour days, she rarely had enough money for herself, much less enough to send home. She had been lied to and trapped. She had no hope until Abdul Baif came along. He was mesmerizing. He understood her anger, her despair. He knew how to strike back. I'm doing the right thing. It's Allah's will. She made her way to the top level. The North Tower looked like the pictures they'd shown her, though it was more crowded than she'd imagined. Good. From the 4th-floor balcony, she peered down over a giant atrium. Gold and silver stars hung from invisible fishing line. They seemed to float above the immense open space, slowly dancing with graceful twists and turns in a gentle breeze from the air conditioning, occasionally tapping each other, making a peaceful wind chime-like sound. Crowds filled the ground floor. Shoppers made their way onto the balconies below. She scanned the people around her, mothers with young children, teenagers out on a shopping spree, businessmen on a lunch break, all part of the system that had oppressed her for 6 years. Greedy, selfish people, people who'd betrayed Islam. Abdul Ba'ith was right. A statement had to be made. "It's Allah's will." A little girl in pigtails ran by. She reminded Bharat of her sister in India. She always put her hair up in pigtails and would run laughing through the village. Tears formed in Bharat's eyes. Her hands began to shake. "Should I?" The words of Abdul Ba'ith flashed through her mind. "You need to fulfill your destiny. You want to fulfill your destiny, don't you?" She nodded at the unspoken words. "I'm doing the right thing. It's Allah's will." She took a deep breath, her senses heightened. The sounds of people echoed around her. The buzz of life surrounded her. Not for long. She breathed in the sweet smell of spices from a nearby store. She wiped the sweat from her brow. The trembling in her hands increased as a general weakness moved down her body. "It is time." She reached into a hidden pocket in her burqa and gripped the handle of a small device. Her thumb froze for a moment on the button. With the slightest of movements, she pushed the button. Soon she'd be in paradise. It would be over in 6 seconds. 1. She stood on a chair at the ledge. 2. She looked out at the hanging stars. 3. She heard the sound of a baby crying. 4. She spread her arms and swan dived over the edge. 5. Someone screamed. 6. A blinding flash. He rubbed the hooked scar that sat high on his left cheek, a reminder of a battle long ago. He looked up through mirrored sunglasses and smiled as Bharat disintegrated into vapor just below the second level. Going off in midair, the blast wave spread in all directions, causing nearby structures to weaken and collapse, crushing people on the balconies and sending large chunks of glass and concrete crashing to the floor. The massive explosion shot the decorative metal stars off in all directions like ninja weapons ripping through nearby bodies. 30 minutes later, the man with the scar strolled out the nearest surviving mall entrance like nothing had happened. He adjusted his sunglasses and stroked his beard as he surveyed his handiwork. He fed off the panic of those running by, those frozen in tears, those wailing in grief even over the body bags that were carried out. The clothes he had been wearing when he slipped in to watch the destruction had been ripped apart by the explosion, but the new clothes he'd stolen off a store shelf were fresh and clean. He'd cherished them as a trophy. Once he had his fill, he smiled and left the scene. It had been so easy to get her to kill like that. He glared up at the sky. So, was she made in your image? Tuesday, April 12th, 9:14 a.m., Seattle. L sat in his office on the 30th floor of the Seattle SOAR building, poring over reports of the Dubai bombing. They had to stop them, but how? Several news channels were playing at once on the 4 flat-screen TVs mounted on the wall opposite his desk, but for the moment only the BBC was not muted. He glanced up just as the reporter spoke. Abu Abbas, worshippers of the lion, claimed responsibility for the Dubai Mall bombing in which 76 people died and 291 were injured. Very little is known about them or their leader, Abdul Ba'ith, the servant of the Resurrector. This is the same group responsible for the bombing in Jerusalem 2 weeks ago that killed 14. Now they promise more to come, especially in Dubai, because, as they claim, there are too many foreign devils in Dubai. Reliable sources report the intelligence community is baffled. Who is Abdul Ba'ith? Why both Jerusalem and Dubai? Totally different targets, Jewish and Islamic. Could this be led by a UD or only the result of a chain of UD lies? L called David Patton, chief of SOAR.